Hey, this is Motion Designer, and in this After Effects class, you'll be learning how to make professional intro opener. Not only this, you'll also be learning how to make custom transitions using shape layers in After Effects, and I'll also be covering a basic text animation. And lastly, I'll show you how I organize the project panel so that the project can be saved as a template. Alright, it's gonna be a fun project. I'll see you in class. Alright, let's get started with the class by organizing the project panel, this one. Let's create a folder named Assets. In this folder, we're going to put all the images and videos that we're going to use. And we're going to make another folder, which is image pre-comps, right? We're going to keep all the pre-comps in this folder, and we're going to create another project which is slides, and another folder transitions, right? You can just put it in lowercase transitions, and let me just change this as well. I like to rename the pre-comp in uppercase like this so that I can differentiate the main comp and the pre-comps. So that's how I like to do. Depends on you. If you want to follow this, you can, just follow it. Alright, that's how I like to organize things. In the next class, we'll import the files in the project. See you in the next class. Alright, let's go ahead and import the images or videos. So to do that, go to the project panel. You can just double click on this open space, and that will open up a window, and you can navigate to the image folder, and you can just drag all the images or videos in your case and import. And this is going to import this, and while all of the files are selected, just drag and drop it on the assets folder, and all the assets are here inside. So that's how easy it is to import. Alright, let us create the custom transition for this. Let's go and create a new composition, and I'm going to rename it transition 1 and 5 seconds long, and hit OK. And what I'm going to do is organize this right away. Drag and drop it inside the transition. In that way it stays here. Let's go ahead and grab a pen tool with no fill, and I just need a stroke which is white, and increase the stroke size maybe at 5 for now. And let's go ahead and draw like this, something like this. Make sure you turn on this title action save so that you'll be able to know the center of this. So right somewhere here. So I'm going to increase the stroke, grab the selection tool, and you can move this. As long as you're in the pen tool, you're going to create another points like this. So I want you to mind that. Go back to the selection tool, or V on the keyboard, that is a shortcut, and you can move it around here. And let's stick to 150 stroke, and let's rename this to 1 so that we can remember this. And let's collapse this contents shape. We're going to animate this stroke width, so hold down shift and hit page down on the keyboard once, and set a keyframe, and go back to the first frame in the timeline and set this to 0. And if you play it back, you have this. So let's go and select these keyframes, right click keyframe assistant, easy ease, and go to the graph editor. And if you see this graph like this, I want you to go here and switch it to edit speed graph, and change the graph like this so that you have a dynamic movement. Now I have that animation. We're gonna duplicate this shape and fill the entire composition with this. Alright, let's select this and Control D to duplicate this and move it here to the right side. You can use the arrow keys in the keyboard, left and right, and duplicate another copy. And you can select all these, Control D to duplicate, move it up here. Make sure the numbers are in sequence here, and we're gonna shift like this, and maybe we're gonna duplicate another copy here and move it here. I think we might be needing another one to fill out the entire composition here. Make sure you fill out the entire composition. So I'm done with that, and let's go and fill this, the left part of the composition. So I'm going to change this color to red so that I know which one is which. I'm going to select this, Control D to duplicate and move it just below 1 and sequence it like this. Control D to duplicate it just like we did before. Control D. Let's select all the layers and hit page down to go 1 frame, and hold down Alt on the keyboard and hit the square bracket, and then we trims off like this. And what we're gonna do now is sequence the layer, right? So I'll select all of these layers, go to the beginning of the timeline, select all the layers. Make sure you select the sequence from 1 to 8 like this. Right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layer, and you can check this overlap, transition off. And after that, 13 to 9, and we're gonna do the same. Right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layer. Okay, now that you have that, select all the layers, Control A to select all, and you know, you can stretch out this, or the easiest way is put the playhead, the time indicator, to the last keyframe and hold down Alt and the square bracket. You can play with how you sequence the layers, so that will affect the entire look of the animation. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to do here. So that is how you can create a custom transitions. In the next class, we'll be creating another custom transition. Alright, let's go ahead and create another transitions. Let's select this transition 1, Control D to duplicate, double click to open this comp, and let's go ahead and delete all the layers here, delete all of them, and let's go ahead and delete the animation as well. And I'm going to increase this width here, and this time I'm going to start the stroke from here, right? So I'm going to animate this again, stroke width, set a keyframe there. I'm holding down Shift and page down on the keyboard once here. Going back to the first frame here, set the stroke width to 0, and you have this, the same like we did before. Select all the keyframes, right click keyframe assistant, and easy ease, go to the graph editor. If you don't have the graph like mine, go here and select the speed graph. Alright, so I'm gonna select these points and change the graph something like this. So all you have to do is shift it somewhere here and duplicate this, Control D, like we did before. Control D to duplicate and fill the entire composition with this white solid, because we're gonna use this pre-comp as a mask. And select this, Control D, move it over here. Make sure the layers are sequenced like this so that you're not confused. Alright, so the last one, and move it here. So once you're done with that, let's select all of this and hit page down once and Alt and the square close bracket. I don't know what is it called, the square bracket, the second square bracket, and right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layer. Okay, so as you can see, the sequencing is from layer 1 to 6. Because I selected the layer from 1, hold down shift and 6 like this. So let me just undo it. Let me select from 6 to 1. Let me see. Select, hold down shift and select this one, and it selects all. Right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layers. As you can see, if I select from the top to bottom, the sequencing is from the top to bottom. So I want you to mind that, because the selection of the layers, matters. Right click, keyframe assistant. All right, so I'll stick with that and stretch it like this. If we don't want to stretch it, go set this time indicator to the end of the timeline and hold down Alt and the close square bracket. I don't know what is it called, the square, the second square bracket, right? Holding down Alt and the second square bracket, stretch it to where the playhead is. I'll see you in the next class for the final custom transition. Alright, let's duplicate this transition to Control D to duplicate. Go inside this, and this time I'm going to delete all of this, and I'm going to grab this polygon tool and I'm going to draw this holding down shift. And if you hit the plus, up and down arrow keys on the keyboard while holding the mouse, you can increase the points like this. And I'm going to decrease the width, the stroke width, say to 150, seems to be fine. So let's animate the stroke width once again like we did before, and set the stroke width here. Go back to the first frame, set this to 0, and this time I'm going to animate the rotation as well. If you hit U on the keyboard, selecting on the layer, it reveals the keyframe, and holding down Shift and R reveals the rotation. So if I hit only R, then it doesn't show me any keyframes. So hit U, Shift and R, and Shift and T to reveal the opacity, Shift and S to reveal the scale, and so on, Let's go to the second keyframe here and set the rotation keyframe. Go back to the first and set this to a -45. So -45 to 0 like this, right? Rename this to 1, and let's go ahead and duplicate it like we did before. Control D to duplicate, and scale it down. Control D, scale it down this time. Control D, scale it down. Go on like this and fill out the entire composition with this white solid. So this whole U on the keyboard, go to the keyframes here, make sure you put the playhead on this keyframe, and this time we're gonna increase this like this, right? So let's zoom out. All right, let's go and duplicate, change this color, right? So duplicate this, move it down, and this time I'm gonna scale it here. Control D, scale it again. All right, so I'll select all of the layers like this, and page down, Alt and the second square bracket, it trims off like this. Right click, keyframe assistant, and sequence layers, it's the same, like we did before, right? So I'll stretch it out like this, or Alt and the second square bracket. All right, that is how you create custom transitions. You can go and create as much transitions as you want. You can create with different shapes, with triangles, with just strokes or fill or squares or ellipse. It depends on you, how you want to create In the next class, I'll show you how to use these transitions on your images or your videos. Alright, now that we have the transitions, let's go ahead and create a new composition for the image. Let's create this slide 1 and hit OK. In this slide 1 composition, let's go and grab the image that we imported before, which is here in the assets folder. Drag and drop this, and you might want it to scale it to fit the composition like this. If I want, I can just leave this here, but what I'm gonna do is create another pre-comp for the image, because we're gonna use this as a template. You're gonna come and change the image with a different image or a video, anytime you want, and the design and everything still remains the same. So we're gonna work in non-destructive way. So I'm gonna create a pre-composition for this image. So what I'm gonna do is select this and pre-compose it. Right click, pre-compose, or selecting on the layer, Control Shift and C on the keyboard to pre-compose it. And I'm going to rename this image _1 placeholder pre-comp. So I like to rename the pre-comp in the uppercase so that I can differentiate which is pre-comp and which is a main comp. So that's how I like to do things. There's nothing mandatory that you have to do like the way I do. So if you want to follow this way, you can you can just follow. So here I'm going to choose move all attributes and hit OK. And if you go inside this pre-comp, you have the image here. So I'm going to add a keyframe for the scale because it's very flat and it's very static. I want some movement, so I'm going to add scale here like this. Zoom out. So nothing fancy, it's simple, straightforward, right? Something like this, right? So I'll close this out and let's go in the project panel and let's organize this thing. So this is a pre-comp, so it will go inside the pre-comp, and slide 1 in the slides. So I have the slides in the slides folder and the image pre-comps in the pre-comp folder. So Control K, hit Control K on the keyboard to bring up the composition settings, and let me increase this to 10, right? Hit OK, and let's select this transition 1, and you have this transition 1. We're gonna use this transition to mask this out, right? So what I'm gonna do is switch this to the track mat. If you want to switch between these modes, F4 on the keyboard shortcut, and select this image pre-comp and set this track mat to alpha mat, so it masks out like this, right? We can just leave it like this, but it's kind of boring, it's kind of flat. So what I'm gonna do is duplicate these two layers, Control D to duplicate, and I'm gonna offset this timing. What I'm going to do is lower the opacity for the first layer here. T on the keyboard to bring up the opacity. Set the opacity to maybe a 30 like this. What you can do is T to bring up the opacity, and maybe this time I'm gonna stick with 55, or you can scale it up. You can scale like this and duplicate another copy and offset it somewhere here, and scale it down if you want. Scale it down again and decrease the opacity. Something like that, right? So you can trim these two layers off. Hold down Alt and the second square bracket. You can trim this off like this. And let's add the overlay for this. So go to the effects and presets and type in saturation, hue and saturation. Let's add in this layer and go to the effects and controls and check this colorize, and you can see that the color is already applied there. You can increase this, or you can change the color to whatever color you like, lightness, darkness. You can play with the settings, right? And I'm going to copy the hue and saturation and place and paste it to the top layer. So you can just flip the transition, right click, transform, flip horizontal like that, and it comes to the from the opposite direction like this. So you can also maybe increase the size of this and, you know, add a fast blur or something like that. Fast blur, let's try to add that. Fast blur. And it's looking like a glass here. Alright, in the next class I'll show you how to create the text animation over this. Alright, now that we have the transitions ready, let's organize this pre-comp a little bit here. So I'm going to select all the image pre-comps and change the color to red so that you can differentiate which one is which, right? So grab the text tool and type in your text. Skillshare, window align this to the center, and let's create a text animation. So let's go and collapse this and go to animate, and I'm gonna add a tracking, and I'm gonna animate this tracking, right? Once you start this tracking amount, it starts from here. So I want the tracking to start from the center of the text. So let's go in the paragraph here and change this here, center text, right? And go to the align once again and center it. So now it starts from the center here. 0, set a keyframe, go to maybe at, I don't know, 1.5 seconds or so, and increase this somewhere here, and go back to 0, right? And what I'm gonna do is select all these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, and go to the graph, and I'll play with the graph a little bit here. Yes, I want that. And let's add another animator, which is add opacity, set a keyframe for the start, and at this point, the same point where you animate this tracking. I'll set it to 100 and to the point to 0, right? So right click keyframe assistant, ease, go to the graph and select all these graph points. You can just create it like this. And right now it's starting to reveal from the left to right, so I want some random reveal, so I'm going down to the advanced and I'll on this randomize order on, right? So it reveals randomly like this, so I kind of like that. If you want to make the text show up a little bit longer, then you can select the text layer, hit U to bring up the keyframes, and you can extend these keyframes. Select all these keyframes, hold down Alt and grab on the last keyframe while holding down Alt on the keyboard. You can just stretch it like this. In that way it stretch out the entire animation, in case if you want to extend it. So that's a little bonus point that I'm highlighting out here. Once you're done with that, let's duplicate this text and shut off the eye for the previous one. And what I did was increase this size here, and in the beginning I just swept this here and change this blending mode to overlay. I just created some kind of overlap text here and shift the starting of this text somewhere here. Even increase it more here, and I just swap this something like this. And if I play it back, you can see it's really cool. You can turn back the original text like that. That makes it really cool, Alright, that's how you can create a simple text animation in After Effects. Alright, now that we have the slide 1, you can just go and trim this here, trim it, and right click, trim comp to work area, so it trims out like that, right? So let's go ahead and create slide 2. So I'm going to select the slide 1 in the project panel, Control D to duplicate, that makes it slide 2. And of course on the image 1, Control D, so I'm going to rename this to image 2 placeholder. And if I open this slide 2, it is the exact same thing as slide 1. So what I'm going to do here is change the images, right? So I can directly change the images, go and change the images here, but it will also change in slide 1. So that's a problem. So that's the reason why I duplicate this image 2 placeholder. So the way we're going to replace is very simple. We all have the colors now. The red layers are the color. By the way, let's just code this as pink as text. So with this as well, pink text layers, and the red are the image pre-comps, right? So I want the image 2 pre-comp here, so which is up here in the project panel. So selecting on all the image 1 pre-composition here, holding down Alt on the keyboard, drag and drop it like this. That replaces it to image 2 here. You can see here in the layers, but nothing changed because we haven't changed the image inside. So let's go into the asset here, select the layer, hold down Alt on the keyboard, drag and drop it, and it is there. But the animation is the same. So I'm going to reverse this animation, select the keyframe, right click keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframe. So alright, so now if you go back to slide 2, you can see everything changes. You can now change the transitions because we have 3 transitions here. So the same thing applies. Select the transitions like this, and this time I'm going to grab transition 2, hold down Alt and drag and drop it, and this time I have this, right? To transform and flip horizontally. I can just flip it horizontally, or I can just, flip everything horizontally, the transitions, transform horizontally like this. And you can even change the text. Maybe I might want to decrease the size of the font, and I can change this as well, motion, or I can just add design like this, right? And even scale it up way big, and I can just use this eye and reverse this like this, and even change the color of the text. Can just be creative and change the overlay here of the images. You can just something like this. Let's change this as well, right? Let's see, right? Let's change back the font to white maybe. Yes. All right. That's how you can add some variation in the animation. All right. Let's go ahead and create slide 3. Control D to create slide 3, and the same like we did before. And let's rename this to 3. I think you can follow me now. So let's go and select the image layers like we did before, and hold down Alt and drag and drop it. Go inside the image pre-comp and go and select your image. Hold down Alt, drag and drop it. Right, so I'm going to reverse the animation again, animation of the scale, time reverse keyframes. Maybe zoom it out a little bit. Somewhere like this, right? So close this out and go to image 3, and you have this. And what I'm going to do is select all the transitions once again and grab the transition 3 here, hold down Alt and drag and drop it, and you have this. So you can change the color of the overlay once again. You can even change the text, motion design. After effects. So that is how you can create different slides using one single slides, and changing the entire design with a little effort. In the next lesson, I'll show you how to compile all these slides together in a single composition so that you have your final intro promo. Let's create a new composition, and this should be 15 seconds, and rename this to final com, right? So okay, and this is the final com, and we're gonna add these slides inside. So slide 1, 2 and 3, right? So maybe I'm gonna add it up here, 2 and 3 like this. So slide 1 here, and at this point you can just grab in the slide 2 and add this slide 3 here. And you can keep on making slides and put it inside this, drag and drop it inside this final composition and stack it on top of this like what we did here. And you can make it long, like 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes, depending on your need. You can just make that happen. And at the end, let's hit T on the keyboard and set a keyframe for the opacity and zero this out, and it fades to black like this. So that is how you can create a promo intro opener in Adobe After Effects. I hope you learned something from this course. Thanks a lot for joining the course. Once again, this is Motion Designer, and I'll see you in the next course.